In 2025, McLaren crushed the competition constructors title with 6 races to spare. But now, as 2026 approaches, the exact same team is playing a game so dangerous. It could either rewrite the next 5 years of Formula One, or destroy everything they've built. Because what McLaren is doing behind the scenes isn't just radical. It's a full-blown engineering gamble at the start of a regulation reset. Sources suggest they've passed on early testing opportunities. They're hiding launch dates. And they've already sold their 2026 race car before the first Grand Prix. But here's what changes everything. Some insiders believe McLaren's approach could unlock a hidden loophole in the new rules. One that might let them deploy hybrid energy in ways the FIA never intended. Later in this video, we'll look at a specific feature in the MCL40 that could create a race start advantage so extreme. Other teams are already preparing protests before round 1. Publicly, McLaren has made no dramatic promises about 2026. No flashy concepts. No sweeping declarations. Just a short, quiet confirmation: the 2026 car is in development, and everything is on schedule. But the tone, if you listen closely, is different. There's no teaser campaign. No marketing build-up. And unlike Ferrari or Red Bull, who have already booked full-track test dates for early shakedowns, McLaren has yet to announce when, if ever, the MCL40 will appear before the Bahrain Grand Prix. That's not confidence. That's something else. Internally, the situation is far more complex. The McLaren Technology Center is operating on a schedule completely decoupled from the rest of the grid. While most teams are rolling out hybrid power units with iterative cooling solutions, McLaren has already frozen its side pod layout. Chassis tooling began in mid-November, months before the official deadline. This is not a team preparing cautiously. This is a team that has already committed to a complete aerodynamic and thermal architecture, before even receiving final FIA validation on some subcomponents. In a regulation era defined by unpredictability, McLaren is betting on certainty. The certainty, however, isn't coming from within. It's coming from outside the Mercedes power unit. According to people familiar with the development process, McLaren was given early access to Mercedes thermal behavior models data, which allowed them to design their entire cooling strategy around energy deployment expectations that weren't even publicly confirmed. Most teams started 2026 chassis planning with questions about how long hybrid deployment would last per lap. McLaren? They built their entire car assuming full lap deployment. That assumption could either create the most efficient car of the era, or a platform that collapses the moment Mercedes hits thermal degradation. This kind of design alignment is rare, even in modern F1. Customer teams typically hedge-build conservative cars to account for late engine changes. But McLaren has done the opposite. They didn't just sync their chassis with Mercedes. They locked it in. Suspension geometry, wheelbase, floor stiffness, all engineered under the belief that Mercedes' energy recovery curve would behave exactly as predicted in July 2025. If those numbers hold, the car will be balanced, light, and dangerously fast in medium-speed corners. If they don't, that same car becomes a nightmare of instability and overheating. There is no in-between. And here's where the silence becomes ominous. McLaren has declined multiple interview requests from major F1 broadcasters. No digital renders have been released. No driver comments about simulator sessions. Not even a speculative launch date. Just complete operational silence. And when asked directly whether the car had already passed its initial FIA crash tests, a team spokesperson gave a vague, "We're progressing through our internal targets." It wasn't a denial. It wasn't a confirmation. It was a deflection. And in F1, deflection usually hides either brilliance or panic. There's also the money question. McLaren has publicly confirmed the MCL40's title sponsor before even confirming the car's specifications. This is not typical behavior. In fact, it's almost backwards. You don't sell a car before it's been tested unless you're certain about what you're building, or you've run out of flexibility to change it. Either way, this move reveals something crucial. McLaren is financially and contractually locked into the current 2026 concept. There's no plan B. This car has to work. And that's where the story turns. Because while everything on the surface appears calculated and deliberate, what's happening underneath the real structure of the car, the systems no one is talking about, suggests McLaren isn't just trying to win. They're trying to win in a way no one else is attempting. And if they pull it off, they'll be untouchable. But if the gamble fails? It could be the costliest design decision the team has made in a decade. Up next, what McLaren built into the car that's making rival engineers nervous before a single wheel has turned. The true brilliance and danger of McLaren's 2026 approach isn't just in the design itself. It's in what the design forces the FIA to confront. Because by building a car that uses deformation, heat memory, and aerodynamic shaping to simulate active behavior, McLaren is placing the burden of proof on the rulebook and daring the governing body to respond. There's no switch to trace, no software to audit, no actuator to ban. Just materials behaving exactly as they were engineered to, under conditions the FIA never explicitly outlawed. What this means, in practical terms, is that McLaren may have created the first Formula One car designed to weaponize regulatory inertia. They're not breaking the rules. They're moving faster than the rules can evolve. And if that sounds familiar, it should, because this is exactly what Mercedes did with DAS in 2020. By the time rivals understood how it worked, it was already legal and too late to stop. But McLaren's strategy is even more insidious, because it's not a system that can be captured by a photo or seen in pit lane. It's a dynamic behavior that only exists at speed, under load, with no fingerprints left behind. This puts the FIA in an impossible position. If they act now, issuing a mid-season directive clarifying what counts as passive legality, they risk invalidating their own oversight process. Why didn't they catch it earlier? Why wasn't it flagged in simulation? Why were the materials signed off before use? But if they delay, they give McLaren free rein to set the performance ceiling unopposed, forcing every other team into a desperate chase, building their own versions without understanding the foundation. And that's where power shifts in F1 are cemented, not with innovation, but with the time advantage that innovation creates. Internally, there are already signs of panic. Two rival teams have reportedly requested private clarification sessions with FIA technical delegates, not to protest McLaren outright, but to ask if similar materials and behaviors would be considered compliant if they used them. The answers, according to one team principal, were non-committal, which, in F1 political language, is the worst possible outcome. It means the FIA is buying time, watching, waiting, and McLaren knows it. What makes this situation even more volatile is the context. 2026 is supposed to be a clean slate and equalizer. New power units, new chassis dimensions, sustainability-first design. The FIA spent years promising that no single team would emerge with a runaway advantage. But if McLaren's concept is allowed to stand unchallenged, it could tear that illusion apart within the first 3 races. Not because McLaren cheated, but because they interpreted the rules faster, and the system didn't keep up. And here's the political twist that no one's talking about publicly. The FIA may not want to challenge McLaren at all. Why? Because after years of Red Bull dominance, Ferrari chaos, and Mercedes inconsistency, a McLaren resurgence offers a fresh narrative. New faces, new championship battles, new storylines that Liberty Media can sell to fans worldwide. In that light, letting McLaren's advantage play out might serve a commercial interest, even if it means bending the edges of technical purity. But if that's the path being taken, passive tolerance for active innovation, then the implications run deeper than one season. It tells every team, every supplier, every aerodynamicist, if you can find the soft spots in the rules and get there first, you won't be punished. You'll be celebrated. And once that message spreads, Formula One won't be a championship built on clarity. It'll be a war of interpretation. And we're not done yet. Because McLaren's real gamble doesn't just involve the floor or heat-responsive compounds. There's another component, one that could make the car even more disruptive. If the FIA lets it run in Bahrain. Most conversations about the MCL40 revolve around aerodynamics and energy recovery. But what's beginning to emerge from internal leaks and simulation data is something far more advanced. Something that connects every major subsystem into a self-adjusting loop. This isn't just a car with clever components. It's a machine designed to behave like a predictive model. And the real threat is not in any single part, but in how those parts may be communicating with each other, without direct electronic linkage. At the heart of the theory is McLaren's so-called passive feedback loop. Sources familiar with the design suggest that the MCL40 has been built around a specific form of ride height memory. This isn't suspension in the traditional sense. There's no active damper or ride height control system. Instead, it's a reactive chassis deformation zone, a region of the monocoque that subtly flexes under combined vertical and longitudinal stress. In theory, this allows the car to adjust its balance and maintain floor contact through corner entry, not by responding to telemetry, but by behaving mechanically in sync with expected track conditions. It's like a muscle memory engineered into carbon fiber. Not illegal, not visible, but deeply effective. And that's where the integration becomes dangerous. Because if this system works as modeled, it does more than balance the car. It creates predictability across energy cycles. The entire 2026 formula revolves around battery management. A constant balance between harvesting, deploying, and cooling. Most teams rely on software-based strategies to handle these transitions. But McLaren's system, if real, could allow the car to shift its behavior mechanically as battery output drops, stabilizing airflow and minimizing power loss, without a single software override. It's not just efficient. It's undetectable under standard data review. There's also an electrical dimension that hasn't been discussed publicly. Insiders claim that McLaren has quietly restructured the layout of their ERS cooling conduits. Not to cool more, but to cool differently. Instead of uniform battery temperature across cells, the system creates a small, deliberate gradient. That temperature difference allegedly shifts internal resistance slightly from one cell group to another, allowing the team to prioritize discharge from higher capacity zones during critical acceleration points. It's not software management. It's thermal prioritization through physical design. And as of now, there is no rule in the FIA handbook that regulates this type of behavior. What this all suggests is a fundamentally new philosophy, one that treats the car as a self-regulating organism. McLaren isn't building a car to be adjusted. They're building a car that adjusts itself. Not through illegal automation, but through deep material logic, shape memory systems, load reactive zones, and internal balancing mechanisms that require no driver input. And that's where the other teams are starting to panic. Because you can't copy what you can't see. And even if you could, the lead time to integrate these behaviors structurally is measured in quarters, not weeks. Ferrari and Red Bull, according to several sources, are already restructuring key elements of their packaging, just in case McLaren's approach proves viable in testing. But here's the problem. If McLaren's system does work, then they've created a performance window that sits beyond the limits of conventional development. No amount of wind tunnel time or simulator hours can replicate a car that changes stiffness or aerodynamic behavior in real time based on structural tension. It's not a settings issue. It's a philosophical divergence. And here's the most unsettling part. McLaren has done this before. In the late 1990s, they were the first team to experiment with lateral dampers that mimicked active suspension response. They were never banned because they were never clearly understood. And in 2026, the same pattern might be unfolding. A car so deeply intertwined in its own architecture that protest becomes meaningless. Because if the FIA can't name what's wrong, they can't stop it. And yet, the silence remains. No one's talking publicly. No clarifications. No directives. Just quiet observation. Which means whatever McLaren is building, it's either perfectly legal, or so sophisticated, no one can prove otherwise. Coming up next, how this gamble could make McLaren untouchable for 3 seasons? Or collapse their entire season before the second race.